Emily and Mark Daniels moved into their new home on a breezy October afternoon. The house was modest but charming, a two-story structure tucked away at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Emily fell in love instantly, especially with the antique mirrors that adorned nearly every room. They were beautiful, with ornate gilded frames. "It gives the place character," she told Mark, smiling as she traced her fingers along the intricate patterns. Mark shrugged. "If you like them, we'll keep them." The first few days felt like the start of a new chapter. They unpacked, cooked dinner together, and talked late into the night about their plans for the house. It felt perfect. But on the fifth night, everything changed. It started in the bathroom. Emily was brushing her teeth. Mark had already climbed into bed, scrolling on his phone. She leaned over the sink to rinse her mouth, and that's when she saw it. A flicker of movement in the mirror. She froze. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But then, she noticed it. A shadowy figure, faint and indistinct, standing just behind her reflection. "Mark?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She turned, her heart racing. No one was there. When she looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. The next morning, Emily tried to convince herself it had been a trick of the light, maybe her tired mind playing games. She brushed it off, but deep down an uneasiness lingered. She mentioned it to Mark at breakfast, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I think I saw something," she said quietly. He looked up from his plate, amused. "Something like what?" "A shadow in the bathroom mirror." Mark chuckled and reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Babe, it's nothing. You've been stressed with the move, probably just your imagination." She nodded, forcing a smile. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was nothing. But that night, as she stood before the full-length mirror in their bedroom, brushing her hair, it happened again. This time, the shadow didn't hide. Emily's eyes locked onto it. An indistinct silhouette, darker than the night, standing tall and impossibly thin. Its edges seemed to ripple, like smoke caught in a faint breeze. Her breath caught in her throat. It mimicked her exactly. When she lifted her hand, it did the same. When she tilted her head, so did it. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The shadow didn't answer. She spun around, her heart pounding. The room was empty. When she looked back, the shadow had vanished, replaced by her pale, frightened reflection. She didn't sleep that night. In the days that followed, Emily avoided the mirrors. The house, once cozy and warm, now felt cold and oppressive. She swore she could feel eyes on her, watching, waiting. The shadow began to appear more often, and not just at night. It was in the bathroom, in the reflective glass of the kitchen cabinets, even in the window by the front door. Always mimicking her, always silent. Mark noticed the change in her. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, he put down his drink and turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Emily, you've been acting different. Is it the mirrors? You're still thinking about that?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something wrong with this house, Mark. With me. I don't know, but it feels like it's everywhere." Mark pulled her into a comforting hug, but she felt no comfort, because she knew it was real. One night, while Mark was working late, Emily decided to face it. Whatever it was, she needed answers. She stood in the bedroom alone, staring at the full-length mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, wide-eyed and trembling. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The shadow appeared immediately, more vivid than ever. Its form rippled unnaturally as though it were a living thing. This time it didn't mimic her. It moved on its own, raising a hand to the glass, fingers splayed. Emily felt a cold pull, an invisible force drawing her forward. Against her will, her fingers touched the glass. It felt icy, and a sharp pain surged through her temples. Then the memories hit. She saw herself as a child, standing in a dimly lit living room. Her parents were arguing, shouting, while she sat on the floor clutching a broken doll. Her mother screamed something unintelligible and smashed a mirror with a trembling hand. Glass shattered, and her father stormed out the door, slamming it behind him. He never came back. Her mother, sobbing, cradled young Emily and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Forget it. Just forget." And she had. Until now. The shadow in the mirror began to change, its form twisting and distorting until it resembled her mother. "You forgot?" the shadow whispered. Its voice was cold, hollow, but unmistakably hers. "You let me go." Emily stumbled back, gasping for air. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest as the memories swirled in her mind. The shadow lingered for a moment, then slowly dissolved, leaving only her reflection. When Mark came home, he found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at an old photograph of her parents she'd unearthed from a dusty box. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I remembered," she said, her voice barely audible. "The mirrors. They've been holding it all this time." The shadow never appeared again. Emily couldn't explain why, but she no longer feared it. She and Mark replaced every mirror in the house, but sometimes, late at night, she'd catch her reflection in the darkened window pane. And for the briefest moment, she'd wonder, was it really gone? Or was it waiting, just out of sight?